the compliance crisis, and the one-phase paradigm. The illusion of control. Welcome back to the masterclass. Let's begin with a hard clinical truth. Patient cooperation has diminished in all aspects of healthcare, and orthodontics is no exception. We frequently treat skeletal discrepancies, like Class 2 and Class 3 malocclusions, which are the most vulnerable to these lapses in cooperation, because we have traditionally relied on removable appliances and extraoral traction. We try to educate and motivate, but let's be honest, these techniques are, at best, only temporarily successful. Identifying which patients will actually wear their elastics is about as successful as picking lottery numbers. It is a disconcerting reality that the dose-effect relationship between appliance wear and clinical outcome is poorly correlated. This is exactly why non-compliant patient therapies have taken over contemporary orthodontic literature. Today, we engineer the compliance into the appliance, deconstructing two-phase orthopedics. For decades, the industry operated on the belief that we must intervene early. Functional jaw orthopedics became the growth industry of the 1980s, pushing two-phase treatment prevalence to a staggering 25% to 33% of all patients. But does the data support this? Unfortunately, two-stage treatments designed to stimulate extramandibular growth have very little support in the literature. The concerns are massive: protracted treatment times, long transition periods requiring orthotics to prevent relapse, and an increased financial burden. Gianelli argued masterfully that at least 90% of growing patients can be treated successfully in just one phase by starting in the late mixed dentition, specifically when all deciduous teeth have exfoliated except the second primary molars. Unless a patient has a severe facial aesthetic issue or a crossbite, there are few, if any, long-term benefits to early Class 2 intervention. For at least 75% of Class 2 cases, two-phase functional and edgewise treatments yield results that are completely indistinguishable from a shorter, more efficient single-phase edgewise therapy. The biomechanics of molar distalization. Pendulum versus distal jet mechanics. If we are going to treat in one phase, we need reliable distalization. We are taking mesially positioned, rotated Class 2 maxillary molars and driving them into a Class 1 position. Now, we have many tools: repelling magnets, bulbous loops, and proprietary devices like the pendulum and the Jones jig. But we must analyze how they move the tooth. The pendulum creates 8 to 16 degrees of distal tipping. You are tipping the crown, but the root remains, creating a round trip where you must waste months uprighting the molar later, which promotes anchorage loss and adverse vertical effects. Enter the distal jet. During a typical 5 to 7 month distalization period, it produces an average of 3.2 millimeters of distal movement. More importantly, the distal tip is only 3 to 7 degrees. Why? Because the forces are applied much more apically, through a couple via the bayonet wire, operating far closer to the tooth's center of resistance. The transverse and rotational advantages. But moving the tooth back is only half the battle. A majority of Class 2 patients present with maxillary first molars that are rotated mesially around the palatal root. Before we even seat the distal jet, we use utility pliers to bend the double-back wire to create a toe-in effect. This actively produces a distal molar counter-rotation during the distalization process. Furthermore, while devices like the pendulum require an active jack screw to fight molar constriction, the distal jet naturally yields an average of 3 to 4 millimeters of expansion simply due to the divergent nature of its tracking wires. We are correcting the sagittal, transverse, and rotational discrepancies simultaneously, without requiring a single turn of a screw from the patient. The anchorage equation and the second molar debate. Managing the reciprocal force. Newton's third law dictates that pushing molars back will push the anterior segment forward. This is anchorage loss. With the distal jet, we typically see between 15% and 55% anchorage loss measured at the premolars. A critical clinical pearl: never level and align the maxillary arch with brackets during distalization. Studies show an average 10-degree increase in adverse incisal angulation when maxillary brackets are placed too early. Interestingly, while most distalizers cause the premolars to flare mesially, the distal jet actually causes them to tip distally. Because the forces are applied closer to the center of resistance and the acrylic Nance button is pushed up the slope of the premaxilla, it rotates the premolars distally into a highly favorable position. Timing the second molars. When should you distalize? The classic dogma says to treat early, before the second molars erupt, to avoid pushing against extra root mass. However, clinical evidence for the distal jet proves the exact opposite. Waiting until at least partial eruption of the second molars is actually an advantage. When the first molar is braced against the erupting second molar, it forces the center of resistance further occlusally. This means the molar translates bodily rather than tripping over the unerupted tooth, resulting in significantly less tipping and no greater anchorage loss. The miniscrew TAD revolution, the horseshoe jet. If you want to eliminate that 15% to 55% anchorage loss entirely, we elevate our mechanics using temporary anchorage devices, TADs. But placement is critical. Initial attempts place TADs in the anterior palate, but the bone isn't ideal and the tongue constantly worries the implant, leading to failure. The master level insertion point is on the palatal side of the alveolar ridge, right between the maxillary first molar and second premolar. We angle the screw 30 to 45 degrees into the sloping alveolus, where we find a solid 1.7 to 2.2 millimeters of cortical bone. Because the second premolar root angles buccally and the first molar has only one distally positioned palatal root, you have a massive safe zone to insert the screw without causing iatrogenic root damage. Using the horseshoe jet variation, we completely eliminate the acrylic Nance button and premolar wires. We tie the tracking wire directly to the TADs. You achieve absolute anchorage, and the screw stays out of the way as the premolars drift distally. Stage-by-stage clinical execution Class 2. Combination therapy protocol. Let's put the entire combination therapy protocol together into 3 distinct stages. Stage 1. We start in the late mixed dentition. We place a distal jet and fully bracket the lower arch. We distalize the maxillary molars 1 to 2 millimeters per month until we hit a super class 1, a deliberate overcorrection. We level the mandibular arch simultaneously so we have a full dimension rectangular wire in place when we need it. Stage 2. We lock it down. We remove the superelastic springs, slide the activation collars distal to the stop, and tighten the hex screw. We take a high-speed crosscut burr and section the premolar supporting wires right at the acrylic button. In 60 seconds, your active distalizer is now a passive modified Nance holding arch. Stage 3. The transition to orthopedics. We permit the premolars to drift distally via transeptal fibers, and we bracket the upper arch. If we need to maintain that molar position against heavy retraction forces, or if a skeletal discrepancy remains, we install fixed functional auxiliaries like Jasper jumpers onto our full-size mandibular wire. To counteract the labial flaring of the lower incisors caused by fixed functionals, we must build in defense, a lingual arch, heavy lingual crown torque in the arch wire, or 5 to 10 degrees of built-in lingual crown torque in the anterior brackets. We finish with solid intercuspation using delta elastics while the condylar growth catches up. The result? Predictable, highly engineered cases averaging just 26 months of treatment time. Outrow and clinical reality check. Class 2 combination therapy is your adjunct to traditional fixed appliances. It reduces your dependency on unpredictable human behavior and allows you to finish cases on time, every time. It requires less reliance on compliance, limits iatrogenic exposure, and with the integration of palatal TADs, offers near-perfect anchorage control. To summarize, Class 2 combination therapy is about taking control. We distalize to create space, we use fixed functionals to correct the relationship, and we use TADs to protect our anchorage. Before we finish, let's test your clinical intuition, the Super Class 1 rule. Why do we overcorrect the molar relationship before removing the distal jet? The center of resistance. How does the position of the distal jet tube affect the tipping versus translation ratio? The second molar debate. In what specific scenario would you choose not to wait for the second molars to erupt before starting distalization? Why does the distal jet produce less molar tipping than the pendulum? Answer. Forces are applied closer to the center of resistance. What is the average anchorage loss when using a distal jet? Answer. 15% to 55%. Why is treating after second molar eruption sometimes an advantage for the distal jet? Answer. The first molar is braced against the second molar, reducing tipping. Thank you for joining this masterclass. Keep your margins healthy, engineer your outcomes, and I'll see you in the next clinical deep dive.